Ha! I'm live. I'm about to cut some inlays. These are the pockets. The pieces that go in are already cut. These are the pieces that go into some of these pockets. And this is the piece that fits in here. This is a 2-to-1 pantograph. This is the unique Products Inlay Machine. And the template is twice the size as the piece that you end up cutting. And I decided to share as I'm setting this up. I've already cut pockets for this cluster here of 4 diamonds will fit in these pockets. And see the pockets here, those will be red. All of these go in there, in both of these. And then these long ones will be cut next. And then there will be a cluster like this that's between each one of these. And the whole queue is named Dragon just because that's what came to mind looking at all of these patterns in the maple burl down here. This is a slightly forward weighted queue in that just by the composition of it, the balance point's going to be farther up the stick, which gives you more of a steering than tail wagging the dog kind of experience. So I'm just now sizing up where I want this to go, and I'm going to shut up and just work. I wanted to give anybody who tunes in to the video later a little rundown of what's going on, and then from here on out I don't plan on talking very much because I don't usually talk to myself. Well, I better take that back. I should have warned you about the air compressor. Slid on me. I have to accommodate for the width of the bit, 1/32. I'm doing that by eye. Most people probably hog this out before they cut the fine outline, but I have this habit of doing the outline on the first one, frankly, because I could cut it off if I dick it up. It really helps to be able to see the whole thing. Yeah, I like that. Nice. So you can see how that's half as long as the template. You got a skinny end and a fat end. The fat end of the stylus goes with the fat bit. I'm going to hog it out with a 1/16 and do the fine cutting with a 1/32. I put 3 of their wrenches together because if you just use one, it'll eventually round out on the inside. You can't allow these things to be loose, or the bit will come loose while you're cutting and it'll ruin your piece. So you can't ever not have that tight. So the fat end goes to the hogging bit. Now we're just going to remove material. I think I go deeper on these than most people. Wow, that one's so small it's almost not worth hogging out. But who doesn't like to go hogging, right? Leave it on. Well, that's going to be pretty right there. That grain pattern is kind of funky. I didn't remember if I did 3 or 4 turns, and so just count when you back them out. I did 4. You got to keep in mind that this cue has just been glued up and it's way oversized, and half of the depth that I'm cutting is going to be turned away as the cue is being turned down to final size over the next 6 months. There's a feel that the bit makes when it gets loose and it starts to drop and your cut's getting deeper and you're not aware of it. And it felt a little like that, but it's not. That's probably as far as I would have to go, but I'm paranoid about cutting these down and finding out I didn't make it deep enough. The first couple that I did, I had an accident where I took it all the way down to the core. Not an accident, I just didn't know how deep to go and wanted to make sure I didn't go too shallow, so I just went an extra one and realized, oh, that's the core. I think I was at 6 or 7 turns. But that's how you learn. Screw shit up. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. See, that's why I said I'm not going to be talking. Start dipping stuff up. So this is the last of the hogging, then I put in the fine bit. And these points will get extended up farther and holes will get cleaned up. I thought about cutting my hair, and it was really a hurtful thought. I didn't like thinking about that at all, and so I stopped thinking about that. It just isn't. It's not something I'm willing to entertain. It would simplify a lot of stuff, but I think that would wound my soul. Of course, the Apostle Paul said that a man shouldn't have long hair. And who am I to, go up against Paul? Of course, I'm not making any pronouncements for anybody else in their hair, like Paul is. Alright, so this is a 1/32 bit, and it will clean out these lines, and then it'll be down to the last template that goes in between here. It's going to be a tight little fit. I usually do 2 turns at a time when I'm on the 1/32 bit and I'm just trimming the outside, except the first time, because the first time is where I'm still kind of learning it. Yeah, that's good to go. So that's taking 2 turns of the dial at a time. Not really possible when I'm doing this one, because there's going to be so much that I'm hogging out. That point goes out a lot farther than what you see. That's a good floor. I started wondering if I was out of the template and just kind of making a big ass mistake, but luckily it's just a long point. Ah, crap, I didn't dog that out. I'm trying to be gentle with this because I only have one more of these 30-second bits. I have a bunch more coming in a couple of days, but I don't want to wait. Oh, I dig that. Haha, love it. Just trying to make the outside level with the floor. There's an indexing dial up here that I'm rotating so that I know exactly how far to go, and then you just screw it down into the hole and you're set. I didn't actually do the bottom one yet, and it looks like I did, but that's the first one where I just traced it out. And that confused me. Much better. So, one more to go. You'll notice I hesitate to touch the actual cue itself, and anytime I move it, it's by the dial. That's because the way it's connected there, if you jog it back and forth, it's basically a pin that's sticking in wood, 2 pins, and if you do that enough, eventually it's not going to fit right. And then every position is not going to be exact. So once this thing goes on the machine, I try to never actually touch that. It's not to like rotate it or anything. You might touch it like that, but not rotating it. This is my first time using these templates, and that's why I said earlier I don't. And the first time I didn't want to go in there too deep on this until I knew what contours I'd be hogging out and what it was like. So the cool thing is once I turn this motor off, when this pocket's done, I get to test out one of the pieces that's already cut. Most of them aren't, but a couple of them are cut. And I get to see whether they actually fit. And if not, I'm going to have to recut the pieces and change the thickness of my stylus until I get it just right. So hopefully they're dead nuts perfect. They always have been so far. That's why I kind of stepped into it with confidence. But I know from making my own templates that if it's not just perfect, that's what you got to do. All right, looks like that one's done. Oh man, I just realized I haven't looked at the phone since I turned it on, and I have no idea if I've been talking to myself for the last hour or how long it's been or nothing. But there you go, that's what they look like. I think that's, yeah, now there's just one more set to cut of 4 that will go here. I'm not going to do that this second, but I do want to get a couple pieces. Let's see. Now I haven't trimmed these, I haven't done anything with the corners. Sometimes you hit them with a piece of sandpaper to make the edges clean. I would have more of these, except stupid me tried to cut them on the bandsaw, and perfect! Ha! Love that. Now these are, honestly, it kind of scares me how small those things are. That angle that has to fit in there, right? But everything so far has been. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to use possibly some technique on these. I don't know. But I don't want to be pushing around on there while I'm, like I just explained. So, I'm probably going to hit the edges of this with sandpaper and just get it to fit that way, but the diamonds look perfect. And then the next thing that's coming up a little bit later is this template. Remember, that's going to be half size, is going to be positioned between basically right here. And these 2 pockets here will be in line with the pockets on the rings. Yes, it's going to look busy, but remember that's half the size. That condenses down to less than ½ of an inch at the widest, right there. It'll be centered between those. So it'll look busy, but that's the whole point. All right, thank you for joining me.